Well, here I am. So, I've done maybe one or two reviews before on movies, but I never really got to truly do a review in depth where I am being a critic. And I have always loved watching other people's reviews on YouTube, and I've always loved movies, so why not? Why not start a whole channel of doing reviews of movies that I have seen? And just to give you a little background, I am a fan of horror movies in particular. I love movies from the mid to late 70s all the way to early 80s. So maybe a 10-year span between 1974 to 1984. But I feel that the best horror films were made between the years 1978 to 1981 or 82. It just depends. But oh yeah, it's Friday the 13th, so what better day to do this? Unfortunately, I will not be reviewing Friday the 13th. Maybe later on today I will review, but I actually want to review a movie that I saw a couple of days ago called Cannibal Holocaust, which is a very infamous movie. A lot of people have probably heard of it, especially if you are in the horror fandom. You probably have heard of it. I've heard of it, and originally when I heard the title, I thought it seemed like a silly, awful movie because, first of all, it has Holocaust in it, and I always try to steer clear of movies with Holocaust in the title. Horror movies like Zombie Holocaust and like movies like that. I've heard of movies like Nazi Zombies and just very offensive titles, and the title alone pretty much steered me away from the movie. But one night I decided to watch a review of Italian horror movies. A lot of people refer to some Italian films that are slasher films, giallo. That's what they are called. And it wasn't just slasher films, but a lot of the films were mysterious horror movies. So I was looking up the review, and at the end they said the best horror movie that they put on the list was Cannibal Holocaust, and not because they enjoyed it or it's their favorite movie, but objectively they felt like it was the best horror movie in the Italian horror world. And I don't know much about Italian horror films. I've watched quite a few, like Bay of Blood, Suspiria, Inferno, movies like that. Very popular Italian horror films. I haven't really dug into the more obscure films, but right now I was just looking into them. So I just decided, why not watch Cannibal Holocaust? I mean, Cannibal Holocaust. Why not watch it? So I watched it, and like the Cinema Snob review where he's like, "Oh, this is beautiful music." I was thinking the same thing. I was like, the music's kind of beautiful. And I knew it wasn't going to be a beautiful film in that aspect, but the music distracted me. So then I think we're in New York, where newscasters is talking about how some film documentary crew went on this adventure to the Amazon to document these indigenous people who they refer to as cannibals, which I want to say I had a huge issue with the fact that they kept referring to them as cannibals, 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 cannibals. I did not like it at all. And this movie isn't, politically correct in the least, because they kept referring to them as savages and cannibals. So, it was pretty racist in that regard. And, the characters weren't really supposed to be politically incorrect. But that's one thing that I caught on to the fact that they kept referring to the natives as either cannibals or savages. And I just want to say, I'm not going to act like I am an expert on native culture, indigenous people. I'm not going to act like that. I'm not. But what I want to say just briefly, when it comes to cannibals or cultures where cannibalism is the norm, I'm pretty sure when they eat people, it's when they are already dead. And it's kind of a sacred thing where you eat people because of the fact that these were important people in your life. So basically, when you eat dead warriors or dead family members, it's because they're giving you some sort of nourishment. Like, that's how I look at it, and I'm pretty sure that's what it's like in certain cultures where cannibalism is the norm. That they aren't just eating people alive, they are eating people after they die. It's not like they are always eating people up. It's the fact that when a certain person dies in their group, their ritual is to eat them, okay? So how they describe the cannibal, how they describe the natives as these people that just go in and eat, people alive. And, that's clearly what it wasn't about. And I'm pretty sure that was the message of the film, but it was kind of muddled and all types of stuff because obviously the director wanted to shock you. And I don't think he wanted to shock you in an entertainment type of way. He wanted you to be disgusted. He wanted you to be appalled. But I just want to say this movie is not a movie that someone who is easily triggered should be watching. If you are easily triggered, if you don't like violence, if you are easily triggered by stuff like rape, you should not see this movie at all. It's not a movie for you. If you feel like you have to see it, then watch it, but it's not a movie that I would just recommend to anyone. Like, oh, go watch this movie, Cannibal Holocaust. No, it's not a good movie where you can just enjoy yourself. But they're talking about how the film crew went missing over a year ago, and there was this rescue crew trying to search for them, which I didn't think that made sense, because why did they think they would find them alive? Why? If they were gone for over a year, what makes you think they would be alive? I never understand those type of films where they send in a rescue crew a year or so later. Why didn't you send the rescue crew maybe, I don't know, 2 weeks after they were missing? You waited over a year and a half to just send in a rescue crew. So I didn't think that made sense. But there is this professor who meets this man. Oh, like previously, there was a scene that really frustrated me. So they showed the natives eating something dead, and all of a sudden, these people come in, these white people. There was one black man, okay? There was one black man, and they just started shooting at them. I was like, why? Why? What was the point? Why did you just go into their home, their land, and just start shooting at them? Why? And then, what the heck? Oh, I thought I saw the screensaver change because I can see myself through this phone that I am recording from. So that's why I looked. Anyway, I was like, why? Why are you shooting them? What are they doing that is so wrong? But, in these movies, these white savior type of films, the white man is just shooting, and they're looked at as heroes, which I feel that anyone with sense would know that these aren't heroes in the least. They are kind of bumbling fools. Why would you just go in and start shooting at people? And then they are running away. The native men are literally running away. One man tries to get into a canoe, and then the black man comes out and shoots him, and he falls in the water. I was like, why? Why? And then this other man is hiding, which he ends up being their captive. He is hiding, and the man is like looking around, acting like he doesn't see him. And then the native man is still hiding, and then the black man turns like he's about to leave, and then all of a sudden he turns around and shoots at him. And then he brings the native man injured, and they hold him captive. You know, this whole film confused me because later on in the film, the professor is like, well, that's not a way to establish peace with the natives, because in one scene, this man, Alan, shoots a native in the leg so he can slowly walk back to his village. Like, they were following the man, and the professor was like, oh, that's not morally correct for him to do that. What? Are you serious? Like, you had someone hold a native man at gunpoint the whole entire time. You guys had a native man captive, but all of a sudden it's not morally correct that someone shot a native man in the leg and followed them to their home, but yet it was okay for you guys to just hold a man at gunpoint and use him as a prisoner. Like, things like that just didn't make any sense. But early on in the film, the professor meets up with this man, Chaco, and then this younger man, Miguel, and they are basically, I don't really know how to explain the film. I should have written it down, but they start to, search for the film crew to see if they are alive or not. And then in one scene, Chaco slips and falls, and then this really weird music plays. I don't know why it played, because it was very creepy, eerie music, and it was just a skeleton. There was nothing scary about that skeleton. There was nothing terrifying about that skeleton. So I don't know why they played that music, because one, we saw it coming. We saw that there was a skeleton there, and then as soon as they saw the skeleton, it was like the film decided, oh, this is supposed to be a creepy scene, so let's just start playing really weird ass music. And sure enough, the music was playing, and then he takes the machete and starts picking at the maggots coming out of the eyes of the skeleton. And then he says something that didn't make sense to me. He's like, I know these teeth. These are Felipe's teeth. Felipe's teeth. And I'm like, how did you know? How did you know those were his teeth? Like, I don't understand. And maybe someone else knows how you can figure out someone's teeth. But it was like, how could you have possibly known that a decayed skeleton was someone that you knew? How? I mean, maybe I don't understand, the study of death, dead bodies and stuff like that. But it was like, wow, you knew that it was Felipe by the fact that you saw his teeth. I don't know how that even happened. And then there was one scene where they are in the water, and Miguel is holding the native at gunpoint, and he's just like following him. And then like, what I thought was so ridiculous, where all of a sudden Miguel starts screaming, and you look close up and you see leeches on his chest, and then Chaco is just chuckling like, leeches. And I'm like, yeah, it's so funny that your assistant is getting his blood sucked. Like, the fuck? Like, it's like, it was like I don't even understand. Like, they weren't taking anything seriously. And let me just say, the animal cruelty, I feel it was unnecessary to have real live animals being slaughtered. The muskrat scene was unnecessary. Miguel finds a muskrat, is like, we're gonna eat today. And then you see him take a knife and like stab it up the poor muskrat's neck, and the muskrat is like screaming and is in pain. You can see it. And then he just keeps stabbing it, and it's so gross. And personally, as much talk as this film gets with the animal cruelty, I don't even think that's the worst part of the whole film. I don't. I know those are real animals being killed, but most people who have a problem with this film are talking about the animal cruelty. My beef with this film was the rape scenes. I know they weren't real, but that unsettled me. And the fact that no one really talked about how disgusting the rape scenes were, or the fact that the film crew set a village of women and children on fire, just so they can get exciting footage, does not sit well with me. It's like you see all the racism, you see all the misogyny, you see all the racialized misogyny where a Native woman is raped by these film crew people, and she ends up being killed some way or another, and they try to say, oh, this is so horrible, it must have been some sort of virginity thing where they have such value for virginity. And it's like, you saw all of that, but you want to talk about the animal cruelty, which I know because it was actual animals being killed. But that's not what bothered me. What bothered me was basically the sensationalism of the film. That's what bothered me. The fact that, they got real natives to play the part, and they portrayed, this very kind of racist, portrayal of, how they perceived natives. And I think that was the point. But I want to know, how did they get indigenous people to agree to play the part? Like, I want to know, because that's actually something that I am curious about. Like, who cares about the special effects? I really want to know, how did they agree to the movie? Because I know in one particular scene where a woman is being executed by being bludgeoned by a rock and raped with it, she was actually played by a white woman who was the makeup crew, because no one in the village wanted to play the part, which I thought was weird, because then there were other scenes where you saw rape, and they were indigenous women, and then the scene where the girl is raped and then impaled on the stake, she was native. So I thought, how come that particular scene no one wanted to play that part? I will never know. But I thought it was also weird that they put mud on the girl just to make her look like she was native. Like, I don't know. Like, this whole movie is all over the place. Like, objectively, this movie is all over the place. It was just kind of weird. But anyway, there was a scene where the men are trying to gain the trust from the natives. So Miguel takes off his clothes, which I found that to be a very weird scene, because he starts to take off his clothes, and he's dragging the native man with him, and I'm wondering, what is he going to do with the native man? And then all of a sudden he's standing in this area where the other natives are hiding, and he pushes the native man down and begins to unbuckle his belt and starts to take off his pants. And I am instantly thinking he is going to rape him. And then, fortunately enough, he doesn't do it. But he just stands there and he's trying to get them to trust him, because apparently if you stand there naked, then they will shoot at you and you'll gain their trust. So eventually they're like, okay, they're cool, whatnot. I do want to say, other than that whole weirdly executed scene where he is stripping naked, I do want to say that he looked pretty good naked, because the guy that was playing his character was very handsome. So I do want to say that's probably the only part of the movie that I liked, because it wasn't like, he was naked. So there is a lot of, frontal nudity with that. You could see everything. But I was like, this is a really weird movie. It's really weird, and then it gets weirder, and then it just gets horrific. Eventually, they find the footage because Professor, I believe his name was Robert, he is bathing naked. The native women see him. They go to play with him, and then they run out, and then he puts back on his pants and he follows the girls, and then he sees the shrine of the dead filmmakers, and they are obviously afraid of it, and they are just bowing and praying to it, and then yada yada yada. They are trying to get the footage, and he uses a tape recorder, which they believe is a magical sound box. So he trades the magical sound box to the natives, and they eventually get the tape recorder. So now, not the tape recorder, but they get the tape that was on the shrine of the mutilated skeletons. You just see their skulls, and you know, they were obviously just chopped up and butchered. So he goes to the executive producers, and he's talking to this woman, and they are discussing the footage and what to show. And Professor Robert watches the footage to see what it's about. And at first, they seem like okay people, you know, kind of asshole like. That Faye girl, she's kind of like, oh, you idiots, why are you filming me? You know, I'm naked. And Faye seems all right. You know, there's nothing really threatening about them. You don't think, you know, these are bad people, because in the beginning of the film, you know, when they are talking about those filmmakers, you're thinking, okay, you know, these seem like good people. Like, you know, I wonder what happened to them. You're trying to figure out what happened to them. And I went into this film not even understanding what happened. I didn't understand, you know. I think I read a synopsis on Wikipedia a long time ago, but I had totally forgot all about it. So, you know, when you see the footage, you're thinking, you know, these are just friends goofing around, you know, having a good time. And then later on, you see them killing a turtle, and Faye is throwing up. They are pretty much just ripping him to the bone. They are taking off the shell, and you just see all that goo and gunk. And that was a real turtle. Like, everything you saw is exactly what a turtle looks like on the inside. So if you are interested in knowing what a turtle looks like on the inside, then this is your movie to watch. That was a real turtle. They decapitated it. The legs were still twitching, and then they just started ripping its limbs, and it was pretty gross. So Faye's throwing up, and then another scene, Faye screaming because a tarantula is on her. So they get it off. They take the machete and cut it in half, you know, very reminiscent of Friday the 13th. And I'm pretty sure Friday the 13th probably copied off of that, because Friday the 13th 1 and part 2 is known for stealing from Italian horror films and taking the deaths and trying to recreate it into their Americanized version. So it's like how in Friday the 13th, they actually took a snake and cut it in half with a machete or an axe, I believe. So after that, you know, they kind of seem like rude people. You know, they don't seem very nice. You know, they're making, you know, snippy comments here and there. Faye kind of seems like a huge asshole, and Alan seems like an even bigger asshole. And then they finally meet up with the natives, and this one scene that pissed me off incredibly. So they walk into their home, and everyone's looking at them. They don't know who the fuck they are. They don't trust them. They are just looking at them. They are like, what the fuck are you doing here? And there is another part where this woman is tending to demand that they shot. Because remember earlier, it wasn't Alan, but I believe it was Jack who had shot a man in the leg to follow him home. And I remember when Professor Robert had commented on how that wasn't very diplomatic, a man said, well, Alan did much worse. And sure enough, yep, Alan does much worse. So as you can see, the woman is tending to the man's leg and she's holding a baby. She looks at them and she just like takes the baby and like, you know, holds it because she doesn't trust him. Like she can even figure out that something isn't right, and she just looks so, you know, on guard, and for good reason, because Alan walks up to a man, you know, with a pig. I believe he is about to cook it. He takes a gun and shoots it. Shoots the pig dead. You know, you hear it squeal. It's a real pig. And you see the bullet hole. And then suddenly the men start screaming. They start shooting. Alan tells Faye to record. Faye records. Suddenly the men take a torch and start setting first they round all of the natives into the little hut. And then what do? They take a torch and they set it on fire. People are running, screaming. You can hear women and children crying. Women and children are crying. People are trying to run out, and they are just pushing the people back inside. And all the while you can hear Faye in the background saying, "Get those fuckers." And it's just terrible. You literally are disgusted because you hear women crying. You hear women holding their babies, you know, screaming and just looking so devastated. And eventually the whole hut is burned down and the bodies are likely inside of it. And guess what? To add insult to injury, Faye and Alan are having sex on the hut in front of the surviving natives to mock them. Disgusting. So then you realize that these are horrible, 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 horrible people that deserve to die. You know, after that scene, you are like, yeah, no wonder they died, because these are horrible people. And then later on, Professor Robert is like telling this woman, you know, this is terrible. You know, why are you gonna like set this film out like that? You know, this is so inhumane. You know, this is sensationalism. I am not going to do this. You know, I'm not going to have this film out. You know, like, this is so horrible. They treated the natives horribly. And, you know, these aren't good people. We shouldn't release this. And the woman is like, come on, I know it's horrible, but just think of the media and all of that. And she's just like, I don't really care if it's morally incorrect. I want it out. So then he's like, okay, well, you didn't see everything that I saw, okay? You know, I saw the whole thing. So you and your friends can come in the room with me and watch the whole thing with me and see if you want to release it. See if you are going to be comfortable enough showing this disgusting footage to the public. So they go into the theater, and then shit just hits the fan. Another horrific scene was the rape scene of the native woman. They take the poor woman and they start to gang rape her. Faye is like, this is a waste of footage. What the fuck are you doing? She stings, you know, she says, you know, pretty offensive comments, and those men are calling the woman a monkey because these are supposed to be the tree people that live in trees. They caught the native woman to basically lead them back to the tree people, and they end up raping her. And I think in this scene, Faye is supposed to have morals now. Faye is supposed to be the good one. No, like most evil racist white women, she is not a good woman. She is more or less thinking about herself. Oh, you're wasting footage. This is such an inconvenience. What the fuck are you doing? This is such a waste. Why are you doing this? So it was more about how she felt it was inconvenient for them to be raping a Native woman, and not because she thought, oh, this is wrong. And then she gets really mad when her boyfriend Alan joins in. And I didn't think for once that Faye was some good person who had morals. I thought that she was equally just as bad. And then you see the poor Native woman impaled on a stake, and Alan is pretending that he is disgusted, because you realize that half the stuff that you see is staged. They did it themselves. They did it in their other movies where they would stage murders and deaths just to get better footage, because white people ain't shit. When you watch this movie, white people ain't shit. Anthropologists ain't shit. Most white documentaries ain't shit, because for a fact this type of stuff happens all the time. But yeah, so Alan is pretending that he is distraught, because you see Alan come up and he smiles. He is told to not smile and to act like he is disgusted. So he's like, this must have been some virginity thing for him to execute her like that. Now, I was confused. At first, I thought that it was the men who had killed her after they raped her and then impaled her on a stake to stage it like the villagers had killed her. But no, I believe maybe someone had saw her getting raped, one of the Native men, because you can actually see one of the Native men peeking and looking. And because I understand in certain cultures, when a woman is raped, it's her fault. So the only way for her to be pure again is to be executed. And that's likely why she was on the stake. But then other people have said no, because then the natives come to kill them and butcher them all, and it was revenge for the rape and murder of that woman. But then maybe you could interpret that as, yeah, they knew that she was raped. They knew that it wasn't her fault, but because of their moral code and their culture, they had to kill her. They didn't want to do it, but they had to kill her. And then for revenge, they get the people who were actually responsible for her murder. So in fact, they were the ones that killed her. So that was why they got the revenge. And they so deserved it. They got their heads chopped off. They just got mutilated, and they totally deserved it. One person that I did not think deserved their fate was Faith. And hear me out. I would have been okay if she had been beheaded. I would have been okay if she had been chopped up. I didn't like that they had to show her getting raped. I felt like they could have left that out, because it didn't make sense that they were trying to give this message that rape is wrong, rape is horrible, and then you're showing that a woman is getting her comeuppance by being raped. I didn't like that. I don't care how horrible a woman is. I don't care how awful and racist she is. Rape is never okay. Rape isn't, something that, you can just say, oh yeah, I'm going to rape this woman because she's horrible. No. And, if this message was supposed to be like, rape is awful, but, Faye deserved it because, she was in on the horrific part, it's like, no way. You can't just do that. So I felt like Faye did not deserve to go out that way. They shouldn't have done that, where she gets raped and then beheaded. No, I would have been okay if she had just gotten mutilated like the other men. No, they had to have her raped, and they could have just left that part out. They could have just had her, fighting, and then they take the axe and, start beating her. That's what they could have done. So, yeah, I just don't like how racist white women end up getting their, not getting their revenge, but the people who were victimized by those racist white women end up getting their revenge by raping them. That does not settle well with me. So after they see this horrible thing, because we are all watching the same thing and the reactions are priceless, one man gets up and just walks out. No explanation, just walks out. shuts the door. Then slowly other people are getting up. You know, there's no expression. They are just watching it. And then the woman where Robert was arguing with, saying that, you know, we don't need to release this. And she's like, oh, yes, we do. She whispers something into this man's ear sitting next to her. Then she leaves. So the man gets up, makes a phone call, and says, I want this burned, all of it. Thank you. And then he leaves. And then Robert leaves. And then Robert at the end is like, I wonder who the real cannibals are. Can I just say this? I think they used cannibal and savage interchangeably, okay? Because it's like, come on. If you would have been like, I wonder who the real savages were, yeah, that would have made sense. But you use cannibal and savage interchangeably, which, you know, is really offensive for you to do that. I mean, I understand the message of this film, but when it comes to the whole thing, it was a mess. And, you know, as someone, you know, who feel like I can talk a lot about the film, who didn't think it was a horrible movie, as in a horrible, shitty film, I just felt like it was a mess. You know, objectively, it was a mess. Now, watching it through, you may find it a little bit boring, and you may not understand what the fuck is going on until the very end. You know, then everything comes full circle. But I just feel like it was just like a walking contradiction, you know, for the people to have one message but then have another. Because they talk about how it's horrible to kill people on camera because of sensationalism, but then they were killing animals on camera. And it's like, yeah, animals aren't human, but it just didn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? So, objectively, the movie didn't make quite sense. But then objectively, it was a pretty good film with the message that they were trying to make. Because I don't think they were glorifying the violence. I don't think that they were, you know, glorifying the racism. I think the point of the movie was that it was so horrific because of white supremacy, this ideal of manifest destiny where people are thinking that they are saving the world by slaughtering Native people. And that's the real horror of it all, that these are things that have happened in real life. You know, this wasn't some exaggeration where, oh, this was just a movie. You know, this stuff happened. You know what happened. And I just felt that, I felt the movie was terrifying in that regard. It was pretty gory, pretty bloody. It looked real. The dead bodies looked quite real. Of course, you know that the animal cruelty was definitely real. One thing I want to remark was how everyone was saying, oh, this is such good footage and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, these people are professionals. No, they weren't.